Hello and welcome to Disenthrall. Today we bring you Travis Hallman to talk about his questions on anarchy. Travis Hallman is the lead administrator for the Ask a Libertarian Facebook team, whose mission is spreading awareness of libertarianism and informing non-libertarians, while empowering those who support liberty on a daily basis. Travis Hallman's favorite quote is, "If your only tool is a hammer, then every problem looks like a nail," by Abraham Maslow. Travis Hallman is a libertarian because he cares equally for the low class, mid class, and high class, the minorities and the majorities, the fortunate and the unfortunate. Thank you for joining us today for a conversation. Travis, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me, Mr. Smith.
Awesome. Yeah, so part of my activism, as longtime viewers would know, has been recently, over the past 6 months, moving into the political sphere, because there's a lot of people that pay attention to politics because it has control over their lives. And so if I can sort of slide in front of all those people paying attention to the silly game and sort of use it as a platform to speak a little bit of truth to people, then I'm going to try it. And at the Ask a Libertarian platform, we had a pretty cool AMA talk, and I appreciate them for having me on. Yeah, and as you said, that kind of struck up a conversation between us on anarchy, voluntarism, which I would call the logical conclusion of libertarian principle and thought. And I wanted this time together today to just be sort of an informal discussion where you're curious about how things could work and would work and wouldn't work and might work, and what may or may not be scary or may or may not work or function as well. And I don't think there's enough of those conversations online, because a lot of people have the same questions. When I talk to this person and that person and that person, they all pretty much ask the same things. So if we can have one of these conversations live for everyone, maybe we can answer everyone's questions at once. I think this is going to be fun, and I'm excited and looking forward to it. So I'm going to kind of like let you drive the show, though, because this is your conversation. I'm just sort of here to answer questions and to kind of ask questions back at you to make you maybe think about a few things. So take it away, Travis.
This next and last section is about agorism versus partyarchy. From my experience, many libertarians are familiar with the term agorism, but not as many are familiar with the term partyarchy. And I haven't done an official. Yeah. Oh, okay, great. Yeah, well, I'm glad I get to reach one more person and the viewers with these words. So I'm going to do my best to put them into my own words. I feel like I'll get really close to accurate. So agorism, I'll start there, since we already know what that, most of us already know what that is a way of dismantling the state. They're both forms of dismantling the state. Agorism is a way of dismantling the state by removing oneself completely from the state, and partyarchy is the end goal is to dismantle the state, but to use the methods of the state to get to that point. So a few characteristics that's common with agorists is civil disobedience, like Martin Luther King Jr. had preached a lot about. Counter-establishment economics, which is basically a fancy name for the black market. Many agorist libertarians will engage in counter-economics so that they're not funding the state through taxes. And then my last part of the description for an agorist would be someone that refrains from voting, because voting is a state construct of itself, and to engage in voting is to engage in state operations, which would be against their ethics. So, and then partyarchy would basically be this people that support partyarchy support dismantling the state by voting libertarian politicians in office to dismantle the state for them. So that's how I would describe the two. But I would like to break them down into three different sections: the civil disobedience, counter-establishment economics, and voting. So to begin the discussion, have you ever engaged in civil disobedience?
Yes, actually. I don't know if you've seen the recent video. We've done it twice now. Actually, a group has done it about 5 times, but I participated in the last 2. It is illegal in Dallas, Texas, to feed the homeless without a license. And so maybe we can pull up a quick clip from that video. But we literally do exactly that. We all strap on guns and rifles. We march down to downtown Dallas, and we make a big show of feeding the homeless, and we sort of dare anyone to stop us for multiple reasons. I mean, first of all, it's also illegal in Houston, Texas, and there are groups that attempted to do that without guns, hint, hint, and were thrown in prison for trying to feed the homeless without a license. We do it with guns, and we get left alone. I think that's a pretty loud statement on the Second Amendment in and of itself. But absolutely, I participate in civil disobedience. Do you have a quick clip of that?
Pull it up 1 second.
All right, go ahead. Yeah, so it's a bunch of people. We fed probably 300 people that day, in spite of the law, and everyone was armed, and not a single person was hurt, and we did a lot of good that day. And then we went out later that night and gave tents to the homeless people that were literally sleeping on the concrete. Like, we would walk by, and there are people. Before I did this the first time, I really didn't know. Like, you don't know. I mean, you know that people are homeless and they sleep outside, but you don't internalize, you don't really understand what that means. But there are literal humans literally sleeping on the concrete. And we went out at night in the freezing cold, in temperatures I couldn't even, I really would have, before that day, thought that you would just die if you attempted that. And we gave them tents for them to sleep in. And yeah, and that was 100% illegal, and we 100%, ethics are way more important than the law.
Is this the video? Is it ready to view?
No, I was just...
Was that up?
I can play the audio, but I was just kind of showing the little clips of, all the stuff that was going on as far as...
We'll link it in the description. Go ahead.
Yeah, we can link it there. But, you got everybody,
Great.
There's all this stuff as far as where people are setting up shop and handing out food, all kinds of stuff. There's the music.
Amazing. So a question about that event specifically, with you engaging in that form of civil disobedience, would have there ever been a hypothetical line in the sand that if the state passed this certain line, you would have pulled out, said abort mission? If so, what would have that line looked like?
My mission, when you choose to have children, I think your mission in life has to change to be about them. If you're going to create a life, if you're going to put that life into the peril that is existence in the current state of affairs, your mission has to change to try and make the world the best place you possibly can for them. So my last stand would be somewhere around my kids and their safety and their ability to exist. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, I think that's beautiful, very touching. I wanted to ask that question so that our viewers can hear an idea, like a guideline, that they can see what you're doing and follow your example of where you would draw the line of the state's intrusion and your self-preservation. So the next question regarding civil disobedience: how would you discuss the importance of civil disobedience with a partyarchy libertarian?
Can you give me like a one sentence, what's a partyarchy libertarian? I kind of lost it.
Absolutely. It's okay. So a partyarchy libertarian would support the end result of dismantling the state, but the means of dismantling the state would be through political power, such as voting in libertarians into office and then letting those libertarians sign or not sign legislation that dismantles the state.
I think you first have to acknowledge that there is no mechanism that can be there's no lever that any politician can pull, all the way to the president himself, that would end the state. That lever literally does not exist. The most you could ever get is a reduction in this or a little less of that. And I think if you look at history at all attempts at some kind of incremental reduction in government have been an utter failure. And we can go back to Rothbard. Rothbard did an amazing analysis of the success of the Marxists and socialists over the last 30 years. Who's been more successful, the conservatives or the socialists? I think our society has pretty much in every possible metric moved towards socialism over the past 30 years. And so he examined why that was and the levers that they're trying to pull. And it has nothing really to do with winning office and pulling levers. It has everything to do with standing on what they consider their principle. You have the right. They don't say, elect so and so he can go in and give us, free medical care. They say you have the right to medical care, and anybody that tells you don't have that right is evil. They speak the language of ethics and principle, and then people follow that. And I think that's what libertarians need to do a lot more of, because this was the problem. This is the problem with Kokesh's campaign, and the same problem with mine before I changed to the Declaration of Individual Independence. As libertarians, we should not be telling people that the way to achieve freedom is to vote. Voting is a meaningless, immoral, invalid process to decide who controls you. Because it lacks consent. Whether or not you vote, the system will control you. That means it lacks consent. That makes voting, at best, just like sullying yourself by playing an immoral game. And if you believe in, if you agree with Mises and with the most basic libertarian idea that you are responsible for the effects of your actions, you own your body, and the things that you use your resources to achieve, you also own. You own the effects of your actions. If you choose to take positive action in the world in the form of a vote, if you choose to use your human action to assist a politician in winning power over other people, invalid power, but power nonetheless, then you are responsible for the effects of that action, at least to some degree. That makes you culpable for the effects of your vote. And a lot of people call, voting as violence is a dangerous leftist idea, Adam Kokesh. It's just owning the effects of your actions. If you take actions in the world and those actions have effects, real world effects on people's lives, and if those effects are evil, if you're violating people's consent, if the effects of your actions are violating people's consent, you are partially, if not completely, culpable for that crime. So if voting violates people's consent and you took the positive action of voting, you're partially culpable for that as well. So, therefore, who is safe to vote for? I don't know of anyone. I didn't vote on because I was scared. There's no one safe to vote for that won't violate morality. Because if I vote for Trump to keep Hillary out, well, Trump has bombed a lot of children. Well, you know all the stuff he's doing. People are literally culpable for helping that happen. Granted, they're not culpable for helping Hillary's evil happen, but they are culpable for helping Trump's evil from happening. So, is it even possible? Is there even an option to vote for that doesn't make you culpable for some crime? And that's what I'm trying to do with my Not Governor campaign. I'm trying to see if it's even possible to provide people an option that violates no one's consent. Because if you can't find a non-consent violating option, please don't vote. Don't make yourself culpable, co-conspirator to those crimes, especially not while calling yourself a libertarian. That's self-contradictory, or you become a hypocrite. Oh, we believe in not violating anyone's consent, but I'm going to vote for this politician who is actually going to violate a bunch of people's consent. Did that answer your question?
Partially.
Well, ask what I missed, and I'll try again. Sorry.
I'll add a little bit and reiterate. I think everything was great for discussion. So if one of my friends wants a service and I refer a company to do that service for them, then that company does a terrible job. I'm at least partially responsible for referring that company to my friend in the eyes of my friend. So I can understand where you're coming from whenever you say that people that vote for bad politicians that are using force and things of that nature, then they are at least partially responsible. So considering that there is no lever in government to abolish government, then would you say that civil disobedience is pertinent to dismantle the state?
Yeah, I think people have recently said, and you can check out my Larkin interview for a discussion on this. Some people have said, but politics, it is possible to get some measure of freedom using the political process. And they used weed legalization as an example of that. My response was that, no, politics did not grant more weed freedom. It was the mass public ignoring the bad laws, doing it anyway, telling their friends, sharing it with their friends, talking about it, demanding the freedom. And politics followed, because the government has to at least maintain a veneer of consent of the governed. And if they go against the mass will of the people too much, then people start to see behind the curtain. So politics did not provide weed freedom. The people just did it and demanded it and made it happen. And the political ruling class, said, oh, okay, well, we better do this. Just like with alcohol prohibition.
So is there any size of civil disobedience that is not impacting? So I'll give you an example of something I think I understood correctly today. It seems so minute that it just, I couldn't have read it right. But it is, from what I understand, people are marching or walking without shoes on, without flip-flops on. They're doing it barefoot. I think it's called the Barefoot March. And they're doing it because it's a crime to drive a car without sandals or shoes of any form on the feet. The reasoning behind that is because the brake pads, the brake pedal can get really, really hot and cause an accident if you can't press the brakes. That's the statist logic behind that law. So the question is, would that be an example of fighting a law that is so minute that it's a waste of time to engage in that civil disobedience? And if so, how big should someone start? And if not, how little should someone start?
It is a total personal aesthetic preference. There isn't a moral should. So let's leave that alone for right now. It's not like you have a moral obligation to resist. No victim ever has a moral positive obligation to resist. That said, I roll stop signs quite frequently, and I especially like to do it when I have a car full of blue pillars. They're like, oh, you just blew through that stop sign. I'm like, yeah, there's no one around. There's no victims. It's a dumb law. I shouldn't be attacked for that. If people are getting attacked for not wearing shoes in cars, imagine that's like a marketing campaign ready to go. Like, want to be safe? Like, the cops will literally, ostensibly, to keep you safe from barefoot driving, they will attack you and rob you for doing that. They're handing us those sales pitches. So is it too small? Like, rolling a stop sign is a great example. Even when there's no one in my car, a lot of times I'll roll a stop sign if there's no one around, because if there's a victim, it actually becomes a crime, right? But if there's no victim, I roll the stop sign. Maybe some neighbor sees it happen. Now, most people would probably be like, lawbreaker, that criminal. I wish there was a cop around, and a lot of people would even call the cops on something like that. But do I think there's anything too small? No, because even if no one sees it, you in your own head are flexing the muscle of I own myself, I own my body, I maintain agency over my property, and I'll use it however I want. And so if not wearing shoes while driving, flexes that muscle, do it, man. Do it.
In the spirit of devil's advocate, wouldn't getting caught by the police engaging in civil disobedience be counterproductive to the agorist movement? Because once a police officer catches someone engaging in civil disobedience, the next step is handcuffs, the next step is court, and the next step is fines. So
or murder,
the person now becomes a criminal. That's true. That's true. But if the person is required to pay fines, then those fines go to the state. So would it be a counterproductive movement to engage in civil disobedience and get caught by the state?
So you briefly said there something that made it sound like the victim was culpable for the money going to the state, which is absolutely not the case. You can never victim blame in that way. An example of that scenario would be if you own a dark alleyway and you have the right to walk down your dark alleyway, it's yours, and you get robbed, and they take your money and go do awful things with it. You're absolutely in no way culpable for the crimes of that thief. Day two. It's still your alley. You still have a right to walk down that alley. It's yours. Same thief shows up, robs you again. You are still not culpable for those crimes because it's your property. You have a right to do that. So if barefoot driving is absolutely something you have a right to do, and that's just another way of saying no one has the right to use force to stop you, then you're never culpable for the crimes of the state when they choose to rob you for that. Now, practically, is it good? Like, so like Adam Kokesh marched in Washington, D.C. with a shotgun and had his house raided and did a lot of prison time, which removed him from the activist community for quite some time behind that. And during that time, he was pretty much ineffective as an activist. Larkin Rose spent a year in prison for resisting theft in the form of taxes by the government. During that year, he was basically invisible and not really effective as an activist, I would argue. Some people might disagree. So it's a personal decision. How do you want to resist? How much are you willing to risk? Is what you're risking really worth it? Is it practical? What's the most effective way? I think these are really personal case-by-case decisions that you kind of have to make for yourself.
I think this is interesting because this conversation somewhat turned into a class for civil disobedience. We're not necessarily telling people specifically where to disobey and how to disobey, but it's good to have these discussions because people can hear that we are weighing our responsibilities with our possible outcomes and what is important to us. And I think it's good for people to hear that we have inner measuring mechanisms to decide what's best for us and our community and how to engage in civil disobedience most effectively. Before I continue to the next, though, do you have anything else you want to add about civil disobedience?
I would just say, a great thought experiment is always to try out the other extreme. So we're talking about the smallest ways. Is it practical in these tiny ways to be an activist? Well, what are some other extremes? What are the hugest ways you could technically consider, to be being an activist that might be so extreme that they would have instant, devastating repercussions, and would those be practical or worth it? So one extreme example would be consider the ethics of a traffic stop. You have a person using force, threatening you with deadly force if you escalate, to pull you over on the side of the road for a victimless crime. Ethically, are you in the right to use force to defend yourself against that person's initiation upon you? Absolutely. Ethically, you are. How much force can you use? As much as you need to defend your person or property. You know what I mean. You know what I'm saying. Now, is that response, which would certainly make news, likely end up in the immediate ending of your life, if not in the near future, is that activism on that scale effective? I don't think it is. I think it's counter-effective. I think it hurts the cause because the general public, the blue pillars, would see you as an extremist, and you would sully the name, the labels that you carry. Just like with the recent shooting. After every shooting, everybody always goes and digs through them to try and figure out, were they a Democrat, were they a Republican, were they a communist? They always try and figure out what labels they operated under so that they could associate that deed with that label. And so while you would be ethically justified in using deadly force to defend yourself if necessary in a mere traffic stop, I think it would be an absolute bad form of activism. Just an interesting thought for you.
Well, and just before we go on here, while we were talking about how far should you take the idea of driving barefoot, well, I just did a quick little Google search because I've heard about this exact thing before. Did you know that flimsy footwear in the UK causes 1.4 million close calls and accidents each year? So it's actually safer to drive barefoot. So it's actually practically, would you rather get a fine, or practically would you rather have a close call or get into a car wreck because you're using the wrong kind of footwear to drive, right? So that's something to consider as well, because not all of these laws are for your good, but sometimes it's actually to your detriment, right? Like, forcible disarmament, that might be to your detriment if something bad were to happen, right? So I just wanted to throw that out into the space as well.
I'm glad you did. So you were discussing, Mr. Smith, about defending ourselves during a traffic stop and how that would be a very radical form of civil disobedience. And then there's the driving barefoot, which would be a much less radical form of civil disobedience. And it seems like you're saying that you can't go too small, but you can go too big, too radical, that wouldn't help the movement. Is there a way to more definitively draw the line between too big and just big enough? Like,
No.
where would Goldilocks be?
I don't think that's what I said, and if I did, I said it wrong. I said it's a personal choice. And I have preferences on what I think, and I have predictions on what I think will be the most effective activism and what will be, less effective or disaffective, or, opposite of effective. But it's a personal choice. And I will never victim blame. If you go off and defend your life in a traffic stop, I'll be like, well, that cop asked for it. It was a victimless crime. He shouldn't have done that. I will mourn your loss and wish you had done it differently, the same way I mourned Adam Kokesh's abduction and caging for what he did. Would I march in D.C. with a shotgun? No, because my personal judgment on the cost-benefit ratio on that act, you have to look at, okay, what benefit did Adam get out of that activism and a loss of a year of his life? I'm not sure he got enough out of it. So me personally, it's a personal judgment call. I probably won't be doing that particular path. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. I love that your philosophy of individualism applies in every aspect, every question, every decision that would be made. It's up to the individual for them to judge a cost benefit and to make a decision from there. So if it's okay with you, I'm going to continue to the next question.
Yeah, do it.
Okay. So I asked, have you ever engaged in civil disobedience, being one of the 3 cornerstones of agorism? The second cornerstone being counter-establishment economics, also known as the black market. Question being, have you ever engaged in counter-establishment economics?
Oh, you can't see the rest of the shirt. Can you see it?
None of your
Who's in your
fucking
wallet?
business. None of your.
Okay.
This is the Monero cryptocurrency logo, by the way. Yes, absolutely I have. And I think it is a form of activism, and I think it is effective. Was that the question? Yeah.
Yeah, it was really a yes or no question. And the idea that you said that you have engaged in cryptocurrencies, that's very counter-establishment economics, because they can't be taxed yet. From what I understand, I think they may be trying to find out new ways to start taxing some of the cryptocurrencies. But so the next question would be, how would you discuss the importance of counter-establishment economics with a partyarchy libertarian? Maybe this could, you could discuss how counter-economics and agorism and the counter-economics, civil disobedience, and the refraining from voting can pull that lever that removes the government, that the government doesn't have for us to remove?
I think what we do as activists is, and our only job as activists, and I think this applies to the Libertarian Party as well, I think we are here to change minds. We are here to free minds. We are here to create new free minds. We talk to minds that are, in a cage, that don't see the invisible gun in the room of government, and we tell them about our principles, our ideas, and we show them the power of their consent. And I think that's our only job. And using this terrible, consent-violating, disgusting process called politics should only be thought of as a vehicle to achieve that end of creating more free minds. Another vehicle is participating in counter-economics and, for instance, black market trading, because that contributes to freeing people's minds. When, let's say, a person that I knew needed a kind of medication that the established system would not be easily able to procure for her, him or her. Damn it, I outed the gender there. And for someone to say, hey, you can get that thing right now without having to beg any centralized structure of power for permission. Just go here and do this in this way, that way, do it, and you can make that happen for yourself. That is one of the most powerful messages to free a mind ever. Oh, there's a way for me to own myself and control myself and do what I want with my own property in a peaceful way. Oh, okay. That makes, and that puts them in that mindset of, oh, the government's out to get me, but I'm not a bad guy. Who's the bad guy now? oh, the government's the bad guy. It's a very powerful, self-clarifying message. So yeah, that's probably what I would say.
How would our economy be affected, the United States specifically economy be affected, if every American 100% started engaging in international counter-establishment economics? What I mean, for example, is people started going to other countries only to get surgeries outside of our country, and they were taking our Federal Reserve notes to those other countries and giving them to their service providers for those services. How would that affect our currency here and our economy?
You said the word "our" a whole lot of times there. I'm not part of your "our." I am myself. This is not my economy. I share no part in it. I don't really care what the numbers of that group of people's economy looks like. What do I think the effects are going to be? Don't care.
Okay, that's fair. So I'm going to keep it on the same similar topic, but slightly different. So if offered, okay, we're taking in the concept of counter-establishment economics. So if you were offered, would you accept the opportunity to discuss your campaign on PBS being a government-funded TV channel?
I don't think that there's an ethical problem with that, seeing as how I'm stolen from to fund it, so I wouldn't have a problem appearing on it, if that's what you mean.
Okay, so is there any, we talked about the radical side versus not so radical side of civil disobedience. Would you apply the same principles to counter-establishment economics, being that for someone to take a cost-benefit analysis before engaging in counter-establishment economics, or just to engage, just to do it?
Oh, it's personal cost-benefit, because there are some severe repercussions if busted doing that stuff. So yeah, definitely. Cost benefit.
Okay, so
I feel like most of our questions so far have been like helpful questions for the general public, which I think is really good. But I also like to hear, like, what prevents Travis personally from embracing voluntarism?
What would prevent a malevolent law enforcement agency from developing in a anarchist free society? And what I'd like to point out, in our large, like America, where we have 50 different states and some of them are bigger than other countries, and there's so many different people, so many different opportunities in our wide melting pot, what would prevent a malevolent law enforcement agency from developing? Malevolent law enforcement monopoly. Sorry, I got my terms mixed up.
No, that's cool. This is a really good question that is very frequently asked. And it's not a short answer, because it's a really complicated thing to try and predict how safety organizations might go rogue in the future. I'd say that standing armies are extremely expensive. The only way in all of history they have really been funded is through coercive taxation. So absent a system of forced extraction of resources, your ability to maintain and use a standing army for any reason would be severely limited. Let's just say you had the ability to do that and weren't checked by any external forces. Second, I would say that one of the main things that people use armies for in the world is to capture tax livestock. Meaning, if I take over country A, I'm doing it for the purposes of capturing any natural resources in the area, but also for taking over the structure of taxation in that area. So if somebody took over the United States federal government, there's already a complete Internal Revenue Service structure of taxation in place. People would just continue showing up to work. Your company would continue extracting income tax out of your paychecks. Life would go on as usual, and the invader would now gain a massive income stream. In a free society, none of that exists. If they want to benefit from a tax stream, they're going to have to go door to door and start threatening people, which would be like infinitely more expensive and would make the cost benefit of that particular economic calculation untenable, right? So that's the second thing I would say. And I got like 50 things I could say, so jump in if you have any comments.
So I would like to ask you a question that was posed to Mr. Kokesh during his debate with Richard Spencer. Did you happen to see that debate?
No.
He was asked, not by Richard Spencer, but actually by a fan that somehow was able to send a question to be asked. The question was, let's presume that America decides to turn anarchist, and there's a bunch of individualists, and there's no collective creating an army through coercive measures, as you were explaining, has always been the case. So now America is anarchist, but another country, for example, maybe China, which has not become anarchist at this point in the story, in the timeline, what would prevent them from just brutally taking us over?
Well, the first thing I'd say is what I just said, where what is there to take over? There is no standing system of control and taxation that they would benefit from the great expense of attacking this country, especially considering there's more guns than people here. It would be sort of semi-insane, even for somebody without, like a government is not subject to the free market controls, so they wouldn't have those disincentives to attack people. So if they chose to try and attack a free state or a free area of the world, they wouldn't have the disincentive of sort of capitalism and market forces. But they would have an immense expense that would have a limited benefit because there is no system of taxation for them to capture once they get here in a free society. Second, I would say that when you make defense non-coercive, you open up the genius of the free market to find solutions to that problem, the market problem of, or I would say the market demand of safety. People want to be safe from foreign gangs called countries that want to take them over and extract resources from them. So you would unleash entrepreneurs into the world that would be begging for your money to try their solution at keeping you safe. There's a lot of good ideas. Some of them are crazy. Some of them are not so crazy sounding. I'll go for a normal one, and then I'll talk about a crazy one just to kind of give you the spectrum. The not crazy one would be GoFundMe style defense. North Korea is making threats like they're going to try and take over everyone in this area we call America. Chip in $10 now, or chip in $50 and you'll get the platinum rewards for you'll get your name on one of the bombs that we launch at China for attacking us. You don't. I think in Texas alone, you would raise so much money, you'd have plenty of ability to defend against an aggressive country. And because you wouldn't have to worry about all the bullshit politics, inter-country politics of, oh, if we do this to them, they might respond with, tariffs or, all that's gone. It's just raw, direct defense. You raise money, you spend that money on weapons, you point those weapons at the bad guy, and you take them out, let them have their politics. Politics doesn't exist anymore. Just think about that phrase for a second. Wow. So that's probably like the probably realistic answer, or the more, tame answer. The second thing, let's go extreme now. This might not happen. It's kind of scary if it does. But in a free society, there's something called, and you can read about this, Google the term assassination marketplace or assassination politics. Right now, it would only be able to exist on the darknet market, obviously, because if it was a public website, the people would be arrested immediately for even running such a thing. But consider it like a marketplace for bidding on targeted assassinations. You have a really evil despot in China or North Korea or wherever threatening to attack your neighborhood. Your neighborhood says, hey, we don't want to do that. Why don't we all chip in some money on this assassination marketplace to just go and take out the head of that military or the head of that country for daring to threaten us with that kind of force? I think it wouldn't take much money. I don't think the threshold of money that would be required to take out any single human on the planet would be above the reach of a crowdfunding campaign like that. What that would do is make every despot and leader and criminal in the world scared to threaten anybody, which is something we do not have now, really.
And to be clear, you may not want to just Google assassination marketplace.
Yeah,
you might want to load like a Tor browser
Probably not.
or something like that, you know? So just as a public service announcement, so you're not on every government watch list like me and Patrick probably are, Tor is probably something you want to look at. And also, it's interesting because like there's all this technology that people say, well, the U.S. government can literally blow people away, you know, with drones and stuff like that. And if that was in the hands of the GoFundMe people or the despot assassination, don't Google that term, that could very quickly reshape the whole face of international politics, right? So, yeah, don't Google that.
So just a couple ideas. There's plenty more, and there's ones that aren't as creepy as an assassination political marketplace. But, you know, I wanted to give you the spectrum, and that's kind of the best and the worst. So the market will find solutions to this problem. It's a market problem. People have a demand for safety, and there are geniuses that work in the capitalist system to solve people's problems just like that.
I think that was a very thorough answer, something that was very insightful for myself and others as well. I would like to ask you, okay, for myself, I consider myself very intellectual. I'm not intelligent. I've just spent a lot of time researching ideas and considering concepts in my own mind as well. So the challenge, which I think I may have started this interview off with this, I may not, I can't remember. The challenge I gave myself is to project or to defend anarchist ideas whenever I'm discussing politics with people, even though I'm personally more minarchist than anarchist. So that would be my advice if I was talking to someone that was a minarchist that was considering transitioning to supporting to anarchism. What advice would you give to someone like myself that is a minarchist curious about anarchism? And what advice would you give a non-libertarian researching anarchism?
To all my anarcho-curious friends, if you're a minarchist, you already understand that there's right and wrong, and it's wrong to initiate force on peaceful people, especially if you're a libertarian. That is the founding sole principle of everything that you believe as a libertarian. And if it's not, you probably shouldn't be using that label. So the challenge has to go back on you. What do you think is an exception that justifies you attacking me without my consent? There is none is the answer.
I agree. And for myself, I think we've both mentioned a few times that we love consistency. And that's really, to me, what is most appealing about anarchism is that it is most consistent to the non-aggression principle. Whereas if we take its polar opposite, it would be communism. And if I had to choose between one consistent ideology of communism to one consistent ideology of anarchism, I would choose freedom versus not freedom, which is why I'm definitely leaning in that direction. So the
That's good. I want to thank you for that.
I want to emphasize that that I've considered myself to be intellectual, so I've challenged myself to consider the possibilities of anarchism versus minarchism. And logically speaking, in word context, there's really nothing actually holding me back other than a feeling, just an internal urge, like that says it's easier to defend allowing the government to do the three roles of law enforcement, judges, and army. So the question would be, what advice would you give to a minarchist that wants to support anarchism logically, but just doesn't feel like they have that I'm going to use the word boldness, although I'm a very bold person. It's just that extra step. What advice would you give someone like myself?
I would point out, and I've never met a person that would disagree with me when I say that the government is utterly failing at defense. Their budgets are completely absurdly out of control, stupid, insane. They are wasting more money than almost exists on the planet. They are creating as many enemies as they're killing innocent people. They are utterly failing at defense. I drive down the streets. I'm attacked by people that work for the state. I fly. I'm accosted by people calling themselves TSA for my safety that will attack me if I resist. I am not defended. If anything, I am attacked constantly by the state. And even to forget about all the times I'm attacked by the state and just to say, am I defended against external threats? I think they're doing an utterly terrible job at that as well. So first, I don't think I'm getting the defense that people are claiming to need the government to give me. I think, and even if I am, they're doing such a shitty job of it that I no longer consent. I just don't. It's wrong. Stop it. And then the rest is just to basically put your faith in the virtue of the non-aggression principle and right and wrong and the free market. There is no problem in the history of humankind that the free market has been unable to solve.
Your last statement actually reminded me of I'm going to say the spiritual side of me, being that with Christianity, which I am, I love Christ. So there is a little bit of blind faith involved. There is no empirical, indisputable, unquestionable, there is no indubitable evidence that says God is real. There is a little bit of blind faith involved with that. So I saw a parallel there, and maybe I'm wrong, but there's an ounce of blind faith involved with taking that last step to a completely free society because it's unpredictable. Would you say I analyzed your statement there, that portion of your statement, right?
I would say that there's probably a lot more evidence that the free market can solve any problem than there is that God exists, but there is a certain internal leap. There is an internal barrier to letting go of what you feel is a system of control, even like control of your own life. To a degree, government gives people a feeling that they're in control of their self as well as the environment around them. And letting go of that is scary. And to kind of do a callback to one of your earlier questions that I didn't really answer about unschooling, we as humans accept the reality that we're presented with. When we enter the world, we don't question the stuff around us, at least until we're 6, 7, 8, 10 years old. We don't start really questioning things. We just accept, we internalize whatever's happening to us or around us is normal. And in my home, I run my home. I create an environment in my home to match the way I want the world to work so that my kids will internalize that. They will accept this reality as the way the world is, so that when they get out of my home and people start using coercive forms of control on them, they will immediately, and it is just clear as day, a beacon will go off saying, that's out of place. They're controlling me against my consent. Stop it. Whereas I think 99% of the world, you're born into a family that's generally coercive. You are punished, you are sometimes hit, spanked, controlled constantly, nannied constantly, watched everywhere you go. Decisions are made for you without your input. And so when those people become adults, they immediately go looking, oh, where's that system of control over me that I've had all my life? I need that. Give that back to me. And I think that is where our internal barrier to freedom comes from. Because we were born, we accepted a world with a system of control over us, a control, like a leveling presence in our life that makes decisions for us, but also kind of regulates things. So we can kind of trust that that's there. And when we hit adulthood, we want that to be there too. And to get rid of that, to give up that, is scary for people like myself that were raised coercively. That's my thoughts.
Yeah, I see a similarity there, or a parallel whenever I was listening with to you, but with Mr. Arvind Bora, where he mentions cultural libertarians and changing the cultural mindset of not needing a mommy and a daddy sort of government. And, when we go from our developmental years where we have a literal mommy and or daddy, then, we transition into our adult years, and it's going to need a cultural change for people it's going to need a cultural change for people to be more responsible, so they're less dependent upon a government like a daddy or a mommy. I'd like to ask you 4 more questions before we conclude tonight, though, and I think they're going to be questions that you can kind of answer a little bit concisely.
Okay.
But I'm definitely open to going in more depth. So back to agorism.
I'm also open to continuing this next week if you want. That's good. I'm enjoying this conversation.
Okay. I am as well. So back to agorism versus partyarchy. Oh, and thank you for extending the invite too. That slipped my mind. So have you ever refrained? Okay, voting is one of the 3 cornerstones of agorism. Have you ever refrained from voting for the reason that voting is a construct of government?
Not for the reason that it's a construct of government, but because I believe it makes you culpable for the effects of your actions.
So how would you discuss the importance of voting with an agorist?
Is voting important?
Voting for you specifically.
I would ask you if you think voting is important. I think it's a silly, immoral, invalid system of control over people's lives. So would I try and convince you to vote as a voter? Nope. Because my message is the opposite. My message is that the system is invalid and shouldn't be used to achieve freedom. It can't be used to achieve freedom. Now, as an activist, if you want to vote as an activist to help this activist amplify my message, that's a different thing. I would convince you to vote as an activist, not to try and convince you that that's the way you should act to achieve freedom. And I think that should be the libertarian message, actually.
It's beautiful. So is your declaration of individual independence attractive to agorists? How or why not?
It's not done yet, so it really hasn't. I haven't got a lot of reactions to it yet. This is a new plan that's popped up in the last month, so I don't really have data to answer that question yet.
That's very fair. So the last question I would like to ask is, in summary, of agorism being engaging in civil disobedience, counter-establishment economics, and refraining from voting, which one of those 3 would you say is most impacting to dismantle the state? Civil disobedience, counter-establishment economics, or refraining from voting? Maybe if you could consider the question as if you were giving advice to a new libertarian, what would be the first one of those 3 steps that you would recommend?
I think the most effective thing you can do is have conversations exactly like this with as many people as you possibly can. Describing the basics of ethics, the non-aggression principle, the simplicity of the golden rule, and how important consent is to right and wrong, and extending this idea of consent to government where it's constantly violated, and then finding out people's areas of disagreement. Like I asked you, what area is remaining in your head that you think it's right to attack me to make happen? And then just calmly and peacefully and with curiosity and empathy and plenty of time and patience and multiple conversations spread out over months if necessary, move that discussion forward, move that mind closer and closer to freedom. Now, actions speak louder than words. So in addition to those conversations, I think resisting immoral laws, counter-economics are great methods of putting actions behind the words, behind these conversations you're having with people. Again, I think as libertarians, we should only be asking people to vote for us if they're already mostly woke and want to do it as an activist, because because actions speak louder than words. If we are acting in a system of trying to get people to vote for us for the purposes of achieving freedom politically, I think that message is counter to our own principles and goals. I think you're sending the opposite message. And so your words have to be so loud to override the hypocrisy of your actions in playing this game. Because like I keep saying this loudly, and I'm doing this on purpose. I am running my campaign for not governor of Texas to not, and that's why I call myself not governor, because it immediately puts me at odds with what everyone thinks of normally when they consider somebody running for governor of Texas. I have no authority, no system of voting, no number of votes can give me any power whatsoever over you. And so I have to say that 50 times as loud because I'm using this process to achieve, as an activist. That's how I would answer that.
It's a beautiful synopsis presentation. You know, I have a lot of questions from the miscellaneous file that I can ask you, but I think we've had a very substantial conversation. I'm very satisfied with it.
I have very much enjoyed our conversation. I will not ask you the question of if I've won you over. I'd like you to please take time, think about it, and then let's maybe pick this up in a week. And if you have any new thoughts or ideas or this conversation that you and I are having is the most powerful form of activism, like I just answered your question. And I think doing this publicly for people with two intelligent individuals that can have a peaceful conversation is really, really useful. This is activism, and I appreciate you for participating in it with me today.
Thank you so much for the invitation. It's been a pleasure. We'll stay in touch and see what we can do to strengthen liberty together.
Awesome. Thanks for being on the show, Travis. And thanks to all of you for watching. Thanks to Kason for running the board over there and pulling up videos last minute with no notice. I will talk to you guys soon.
Ask a Libertarian Facebook fan page is spreading awareness of libertarianism and informing non-libertarians while empowering those who support liberty on a daily basis. This is your opportunity to be empowered, and let us advocate libertarianism for you at facebook.com/askalibertarian.